Well, hello there and welcome back to the studio today. In this week's episode, I'm going to be doing a review of Salvador Premium Acrylic Paints, which we've got right over here. And before I begin, I must say that I received this product free of charge, but my opinion on the product remains true, honest, and accurate. Now, I haven't opened it yet, so let me go ahead and use my palette knife to open this. We've got a little notice that says, "Attention, read first," so feel free to pause this video and read what you've got to read. Now look at this. Now because of the camera angle, you can't see how many paints are in here, but this is quite a lot of paint, and I must say I'm very, I really enjoy the packaging, and I really enjoy the design of the tubes of acrylic paint. This is pretty awesome. 24 colors, and I've even got some, so I got 12 premium professional brushes here, acrylic brushes, which I'm dying to try out. That's gonna be really awesome. And I got a sponge. Got me a sponge and a pretty nifty palette knife. This is a set of products that you can buy, a big package that you can buy from Salvador and get you ready to go ahead and get started with your acrylic painting journey. Now this video is about a review on the Salvador Premium Acrylic Paints, and I thought, what better way to do a review on a product, in particular a type of paint, than to create a portrait painting tutorial on it. So let's go ahead and get into a portrait painting tutorial using acrylic paints. Now Salvador graciously also sent me a palette to use to mix the acrylic paints. But since I already have some experience working with acrylic paints, and what we're going to be doing is testing the paints themselves, I decided what I'm going to do is use my Stay Wet palette. This is a palette that has a sponge, a wet sponge underneath. You can create this type of setup easily with a sponge and then a piece of transparent paper over top, and what that's going to do is it's going to help me keep the paints fresh for a longer period of time. But I will be using the brushes that they sent me when it comes time to the smaller shapes. Last but not least, with acrylics, you're going to need some rags to clean up the brushes or paper towels, and a little container of water. And of course your canvas or your panel, whatever surface you'd like to work on, make sure that it is acrylic primed and not oil primed. So I just have Frederick's cotton canvas stretched onto 1620 stretcher bars. This has been triple, quadruple gessoed with acrylic gesso beforehand. So you want to have a nice absorbent acrylic surface to work on. And again, I'm going to have links to all this information in the description box down below. So we're going to start out this painting in the chiaroscuro method. So we've got burnt umber there, and now I'm going to put ivory black over here. A generous amount of paint. I'm going to cover the entirety of the white of the canvas first. Alrighty, so the first thing we're going to do, as I mentioned before, is just cover the entirety of the canvas with that dark color. I'm going to use a little bit of the water to help apply the paint, and already I can feel a nice richness to the paint. I'll be able to compare this paint, at least the feel of the paint, to the other acrylics that I have used, which are Liquitex and Golden. Alrighty, so we got the canvas covered. Now one thing I want to point out while it is drying is the lid. So there's nothing wrong with the lid, but it's a little different. So it's sealed on the top, and I assume that has something to do with, there you go, now it's zoomed in. I assume that has something to do with the preservation of the paint, but this is no problem. All you need to do is get a knife or something that's not that sharp, and then just spin, and there it is. Where's the camera angle? And there it is. Alrighty, so that was step 1 of the process, and the acrylic has settled very nicely. I have no complaints at this point with the acrylic paints. Now the next part of this process is going to be the basic block in. So basic linear block in. Since we're working on a dark surface, you could use something like white chalk. You can even use charcoal, though it would be difficult to see your lines. I'm going to use just pastel. And for the basic block in, you just want to have a few simple straight lines and angles indicating the size of the head, the placement of the head, and no details at all. No details needed. No eyelashes. I wouldn't start off with the little nostrils and things like that. You don't want that at this stage, though you can do it. I'm never going to say never, but you know, oftentimes it's much easier to start with just simple shapes, straight lines and angles to indicate where everything is going to fit. So let me go ahead and finish the block in now. Alrighty, so now we have the basic block in, and like I said, there are no details at all. Just a line for the nose, a line for the mouth, a line for the axes of the eyes, and the axes of the rest of the features. So axes of the eyes, eyebrow, nose, mouth. Remember the thirds, so the hairline to the eyebrow, a third, eyebrow at the bottom of the nose, a third, bottom to the nose, chin, another third. So using the titanium white, I'm going to go ahead and go straight in with titanium white. And one of the things that is most advantageous about acrylic is its fast drying nature. And we're working with the technique of chiaroscuro, which means we're basically drawing with the light. Now there are many ways to do chiaroscuro. This is just my preferred way, and I find it easier to see mistakes in your drawing. Well, we don't have much of a drawing yet, but it's easier to compose with value. And this is not something that's just done with oil paint, but you can also do this with acrylic paint using the fast drying nature of the acrylics. Now one thing I'll notice, since I'll be comparing this to Liquitex and Golden, one thing I'm noticing right away is that this is a little more transparent than the Liquitex acrylic. Not a negative, it's a little thinner, and that's okay. We can work with that. Now you want to set up the basic shape in such a way that you are using straight lines and angles. Remember, this is just like drawing with lines, but instead we're drawing with mass. So let me go ahead and continue to fill in all of the light masses. What I'm going to do now is go in with the oxide black, and I'm going to start to draw the hair mass and then build on it. Now while we're still in the basic light and dark mass, I think now is the time to introduce something for the background. So I'm going to go ahead and use black and white, but just a little bit of the white. And as I was mentioning before, the paint is a little bit thinner, which is not a bad thing, it's just something to get used to. And with acrylic, it's nice that it has a fast drying nature. So I can literally push my problems aside. See that? Just pushing the corner of the ear. And as I paint the background, I also make the silhouette, the outside shape, a little bit more accurate. And I'm going to let the background be almost completely black, but with a little bit of the titanium, or not that, yeah, the titanium white, sorry. I'm so used to saying ivory black, but this is a oxide black. But I mean, it's the same. It feels the same. Now this is the power of the light and dark stage. So the basic light mass is what determines what you focus on, what you look at when you're observing a picture. Now with acrylic, I like to start a little bit more narrow when I'm painting, just so I give myself room to expand. And don't have this idea with acrylic that every mark must be perfect, because background color, you just go right into the background color and move things. I don't want his arms to be cut off, so I want some kind of information for the arms. Alrighty, so now that we have the basic light mass indicated, now at this stage I must say the drawing doesn't have to be that perfect. We're going to continue to build and build and build and build with each one of these stages. And again, with the Salvador, the only thing I'm noticing is that the paint is a little bit thinner, but that's alright. I was able to build up the layers. I may have his head a little bit too large, I'm not entirely sure, so I usually just do something like this. So down to here, the chest should be about one head length down. Obviously we're looking over a little bit, but so that's about good. And then this distance here should equal this distance. So we're about good with that. Now let's move into some color. And what we've got here is very simple. The Zorn palette. I know you saw Zorn palette last week, and you'll continue to see Zorn palette color combinations because they're my favorite. So we have vermilion here, yellow ochre, the titanium white that you saw before. How about we use these brushes now? So I'm gonna start off with let's start off with this number 10 brush. So I'm gonna have a number 10 and a number let's say a number 8. So I'm going to guide you through a simple flesh tone mixture using acrylic paint and the Zorn palette. So you want to start off with an orangey color. We're going to mix right into here. So we're going to use vermilion and yellow ochre. Vermilion, yellow ochre gives you some kind of neutral orangey color. And now you just tint it. So a little bit of the titanium white. Darken it to bring down the chroma. With ivory black, go back into the vermilion. And of course I go into much more detail about this because I won't be explaining the color mixtures too much in my online classes. I started off my students last week using Flesh Color. If you want to check out my online classes, go to patreon.com/upariartist and look for the mentorship tier. $10 a month. You get the option to send me images for teacher-student feedback, and I actually create videos for my students featuring the feedback. So it's like an online class. It's like an in-person class, virtual classroom. So now that we have a nice and basic flesh tone, we're going to now use this to draw with. And I do mean draw. So with the chiaroscuro approach, so that's a little bit too light. So again, the same color mixture. I'm just going to make it a little bit darker with the vermilion and the ivory black. So I'm going to start off with the halftones. Now I'm going to have a chance to talk about the color mixtures with the Salvador paints as I'm doing this. And it's got a really nice consistency to it. The thinness of the paint is actually now starting to come in handy. Now with acrylic, the biggest question that I get whenever I do acrylic is how to blend. And the answer is you don't want to blend in the beginning. And when you get into the later finishing stages, it's a matter of matching your values, knowing how to work with your values. And with acrylic, you really have to be on your game when it comes to identifying value families. And you want to paint thick so that you have an idea, a pretty good idea of what your value range is. If you paint too thin, see, it's actually a little transparent. If you paint too thin, then you kind of don't have too much of a gauge of what your values are. And in the past tutorial that I made featuring acrylic paints, I was saying to layer lighter because it actually dries a little darker. But what I've found is that if you paint thicker with your acrylic, it dries pretty close, almost identical to what it looked like when it was wet. So just paint thick. You want to be deliberate. Alrighty, so now what I'm going to do is, with the same basic color setup, I'm now going to start to build those basic halftones. So it's a little bit more red over here, and the shape itself can actually come out a little further to about there. And you want to focus on the clarity of your shapes and the specificity of these basic shapes. So the vermilion doesn't have as much tinting strength. I will make a note of that. But now let's see if we can... There we go. Just needed more vermilion. And mind you, I'm keeping these color combinations simple. That's why I'm using this orange palette. Now I'm going to walk my way up here. As you're seeing, I'm starting to build these planes. Just like a sculpture. Remember, if you're new to this, a plane just means a three-dimensional concept of a flat sheet in space. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to continue to fill in all of these planes now, and then check back in with you. And I'm back. So this is just to show you that the principles are universal. You know, even though this is not oil paint, clearly, it's not oil paint because it would still be wet. You know, even though this is not oil paint, I'm handling it in the same kind of sense in terms of basic shape and structure. So now we're going to move into the next stage of this process. So the next stage is going to be the refinement stage. So now we're going to refine the planes. Remember, a plane is just a two-dimensional construct of a flat sheet in space. You can imagine the picture plane here. Well, you can imagine the picture surface here as a plane. Coincidentally, the term is picture plane. So I'm going to use black and white and a little bit of flesh tone. I know you can't really see the palette. Well, I'm just explaining the mixtures to you. Again, if you want to learn more about color and portrait painting and just painting in particular and drawing, check out my online classes. Patreon.com/upariartist. So with the subdivision of planes with acrylic, I do want to point out that you're kind of living in the moment with acrylic. So you put a mark down and you leave it. You make a decision, and if you don't like it, you change it in about a couple seconds, really. The acrylic is very workable, and I like the Salvador so far. It does settle a little faster, I'm noticing, than like a Liquitex or a Golden Wood, which is actually helping me out a lot. So with the refinement stage, you really want to continue to hone in on your drawing. That's the big thing. Now typically, I don't really like to lean my hand on the painting, but with acrylic, like I said, living in the moment, you want to be very deliberate with your marks in the refinement stage. In the big plane stage that we were in just earlier, it could be more loose. You could move things around, but now you really want to start to build that sense of structure. And this is going to be a one-day painting, but you can continue to work on this multiple days. And the nice thing about acrylic, I have acrylic still life that I'm working on currently, that I started before this, but you can just continue working without having to think about, well, is my surface going to be ready for me to work on the next day or in a couple days? So it's really a good medium to just jump in without that fear of, when is it going to dry. It's just something you have to get used to if you're an oil painter. That whole like putting a mark down and just, having it dry in a couple seconds. I'm not going to say it's any better or any worse than oil painting. It's just different. But now, getting back to the review of the Salvador acrylic paints, I'm really enjoying the drying time. I find that this dries a little faster than the Liquitex and the Golden. And I also enjoy the transparent nature of the titanium white. Titanium white is usually, you think of it as an opaque, but it's pretty transparent with this. And it is so fast drying, it's actually settling even on my Stay Wet palette, which you could say is a negative, but it's not really too much of a problem. I haven't lost any of the paint. It's all usable. It gets a little tacky towards the burnt umber on the palette, and that's okay. So I'm going to show you how I put in some more refinement for this eye, and then I'll do another cut, and then we'll return and see how this painting turns out. So you don't, even though I'm staying in this one spot, you don't want to stay in one area for too long. This is the same with oil painting and with acrylic painting. It's easy to get tunnel vision and then just forget about the big picture. So I'm kind of correcting things as I go, as I start to add more information. The eyebrow needed to move down a little bit, so I'm going to do that. And again, the forgiving nature, I'm going to switch back to the bigger brush. The forgiving nature of acrylic is that it dries right away and lets you work right on top of it. If you're going to be indecisive about things, then it can be a negative. But, just be direct. Direct with your brush marks. And know that you can change things easily. Speaking of change things, you probably noticed, or maybe you didn't notice, that I put in some of the gray for the background, just so that I can see the shape of our model's hair. That is going to be quite an important thing to see, to get the likeness. A lot of likeness is just in the shape of the head. Alrighty, so that should be about enough to show you how I'm starting to put more refinement in one area. Now I'm just going to carry this kind of thinking throughout the rest of the shapes, constantly adjusting the drawing as I start to add in more and more information. The closer the values get to one another, the more subtlety, and the more subtlety, the more illusion of form that we'll get. And there you have much more refinement now. We moved from here to here, and I was actually working all around, so just adding more and more planes, more and more information. Now I know what you must be wondering. Yes, this is acrylic. It does kind of start to look like oil paint after you put in all of the values, but I know you must be wondering about the how one blends, so to speak. I don't really like the word blending, rather I think of it as putting in planes. So that's more of a sharp transition, so that probably wasn't a good example. I think let's move down to here. There we go. This one would be a much better explanation for the quote-unquote blending. But for me, it's more about getting values so close to one another that they're, the separation between the values is almost unnoticeable to the eye, unless you're really looking for it. So I play this game of subtlety. Subtlety means how close can you get values to one another, yet maintain their differentiation from one another. So that right there, to jump from here, here, and here. So there's 1, 2, 3 jump in value, all in this time span of what, like less than a minute maybe? And the acrylic paint stays open for that period of time that you need to jump in value from one place to another. And as long as you're painting thick, relatively thick, of course this is a tiny brush, but as long as you're painting thick, it will dry pretty close, if not exactly the same as the value that you're observing as you're painting. And I found that for me it dries the same. So going back to the review of these paints, they're pretty good. I would definitely say these are artist quality acrylic paints. I have no complaints with the way that they dry, the way that they handle, and as you can tell, it's a fairly limited palette. You don't need that much color on the face. Sometimes if you put too many jumps in saturation or chroma, it tends to make the flesh tones a little less harmonious. So you want a type of uniform chroma throughout. Obviously there's going to be more chroma in the lightmost facing planes, and the halftones, so somewhere around here, are going to be in pretty much the local flesh tone of the model. What we see for the most part is color being influenced by the light. See that passage? And the thing is to just keep moving. You don't be stuck in one place and then feel like you have to continue to push and push and push and push. The important thing is to have a sense of values. Know what your values are. You don't have to count them, so to speak, but just have an idea of what your local values are. so that you don't have any major jumps in value. And in this stage, make sure to be focused. Listen to some good music, whatever music you like to listen to. Make sure your phone is on silent. Don't let anyone distract you, because this takes patience. This right here, this is the part that if you make a huge mistake in acrylic, it's not as friendly as oil paint. Because with oil paint, if I were working over a dry layer, I could just wipe off whatever mistake I made, but you can't do that with acrylic. So you have to be much more committed, even in these stages. And you know, going back to the Salvador acrylic paints, it's really nice to have that transparent white, the titanium white. At first it kind of caught me off guard, just because I was used to the more opaque ones with Liquitex and Gamblin. But for flesh tones, for skin tone painting, the transparent white really helps, because you can put in, you know, the light of the eye, for instance. The white of the eye is not white. It's usually some type of halftone. And so it kind of helps to, you know, have that be harder to achieve. Here is a piece of paper towel. Just for example, you can see how much brighter the paper towel is than the white of the eye. That's just tricking you, because all of the values around are darker relative to it, which makes it look really light, but it's not this light. If you put in the straight white in the white of the eye, even though it looks like that in the photo reference, it's going to look like we have headlights instead of the actual sclera of the model's eyes. And now let's just put in a few little highlights. I'm putting in the shape of the distant window. There's a window in the background, or sorry, the light's coming from a window and an electric light. And then we'll sneak in a dark but warm value for the iris. And then, you know, I think I'm gonna move around into the background. I don't want to do too much for the clothing. Luckily, well, actually you can't really see it, but luckily the light and dark stage, I actually didn't achieve a completely you know, bright white like I did when I did the underpainting with the Liquitex last week. So it gives me some more leeway with my values. So now we can go ahead and have some fun with the background. I can already tell that I'm going to need more paint, so I'm going to put more of the oxide black, a little bit more of the titanium white. So now we're going to transition from the refinement stage to the finishing stage. Finish doesn't mean, I don't define finish to mean render every little thing. It just means you're getting close to calling the painting complete. Now we have that little element in the background. And the nice thing again about acrylic is you don't have to commit to it, because once it's dry, just go over it if you don't like it. Now I see that I have the arm placement a little off. I must have done that either as a mistake or on purpose. I don't know. But like I said, it's acrylic. You can easily move it around. Okay, that's much better. So let's go ahead and just put the arm in there, how we see it. So it looks like the arm is going up towards his eye. There's the elbow. Think of the distance from the joints. And I know it's too yellow, it's fine, I can adjust it. See how you can draw with mass? Instead of having to worry about all those little outlines, just go in with mass. It's easier to see mistakes with mass, even though I didn't see the mistake before. And like I said, I don't care if it looks too yellow right now. it'll be dry really quick, and then I'll be able to go in and adjust it even more. So it looks like the shirt even can move, and it's okay. It's a very relaxed way of working. Alright, so now I think I'm just going to put in the stuff in the background. So let's do a little cut. And there it is. Remember, the finish doesn't necessarily mean to render every little thing. The background, of course, was a little bit more subtle. The clothing, even more subtle, I think, than the background, to be honest. I did put in a touch of the ultramarine blue, which I found to be really nice and chromatic blue. But remember, to maintain color harmony, it is a little bit better to keep the colors, at least for portrait, a little bit less chromatic. That being said, the Salvador Premium Acrylic Paints handled extremely well, and I'm extremely satisfied with the drying times. They dry pretty quick and they're easy to move around. And I'm also really satisfied with the color range that I was able to achieve. Let me show you some close-ups. And I'd say the only downside really was the size of the tubes. The titanium white I completely used up, nearly completely. But luckily, they give you two. So I have a larger one to use up for later. So there you have a close-up shot of the face. And I really do enjoy the range of flesh tones that I was able to get. And again, this is primarily with the Zorn palette. So the vermilion, the yellow ochre, and what would normally be ivory black, but is oxide black, which handles pretty much the same. And for doing reviews, again, I really think that I want the painting to speak for itself. So yeah, I'd say really, really high quality colors. There you can see it really used up a lot of paint, and that was important in achieving the certain value gradations that I needed to get. And there it is. So Salvador Premium Acrylic Paints worked wonderfully. Salvador, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to create this review. I really do enjoy these acrylic paints, and if you were to ask me, or if anyone were to ask me if I would recommend this to an artist friend, I would recommend these colors. The only thing is the titanium white is a little bit thin, which makes it very useful for portraiture. I'm not sure if it's as user-friendly for still life or landscape, but that's not really a problem. Just use more paint. Paint really, really thick, work in layers, and they dry really fast. So really no complaints there, and just buy more paint. Just have a thicker tube of paint with you and you're good to go. When I compare the colors to other artist grade acrylics, so if I compare it to Liquitex, from my experience, if I compare it to Liquitex or to Golden, I don't see the color being any worse. I don't see the color being that much of a jump, but I do enjoy the harmonious colors that I can get. And there's something in the transparency of the paints. It's not as watery as a student grade acrylic. So if you compare it to Liquitex Basics, it's their cheaper version. That is just, it's pretty bad in my opinion. This, it's thin. It's not as thick or opaque as the Liquitex or the Golden, but it has a really nice luminosity to the colors. The colors mix really well, especially with flesh tones. Again, I really tested this really hard with the flesh tones, and I found that I got a really, really wonderful variety of flesh tone mixtures. That being said, I really hope that you enjoyed this episode. Again, thank you so much, Salvador, for giving me this opportunity to create this review for you. And if you would like to take online classes with me, those of you that are watching, go ahead to patreon.com/upariartist. Look for the mentorship tier, and I'll be uploading, and I am uploading lessons every Monday. I'm also now uploading behind the scenes episodes, so if you want to see behind the scenes of what's been going on in the studio here throughout the week, go ahead and check out the supporters tier. That starts at $2, so at $2 you get to see behind the scenes. The online classes are $10 a month, and there are many other benefits on my Patreon. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next episode. And how could I forget to mention the brushes? The Salvador brushes. They're really, really nice. They held their own. I don't know if I get the... I don't know if it's focusing, but they held their own pretty well with the acrylic painting process. One thing that I'm really excited for, those of you that know how I go about trying to reduce glare in my oil paintings, I have this thing I call a fan brush. Oh yeah, I can't wait to try out this fan brush. Again, the Salvador brushes handled extremely well. But speaking of handle, there's only one con, and it's not really a major thing. It's the length of the brushes, and they're good for, the small, details. You rest your pinky and then you go in one shape at a time. So for instance, let's zoom you in here. So, for the smaller stuff, going in and, rendering out that tear duct, or in this case, just putting a brush stroke for that. And then, all of the little nuances over here. These brushes handled really well. This is a #1 Salvador brush. But I prefer to hold the brushes from further back. So Salvador, if you're watching, maybe some longer brushes. But again, that's just personal preference. It's not really a big thing. You can see the difference. But the brush itself handles extremely well. I'm very impressed with it. And yes, I would recommend these brushes to a friend. It is now time for our new patron shoutouts. So thank you so much, Leslie Berry. Thank you so much, Ismail Rangel. And thank you so much, Trine Mayer Vogsland. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name there. Thank you so much, Barbara Kazanki. I hope I can pronounce your name properly. And thank you so much, Ashley Stringer. Thank you all so much for your support on my Patreon. Don't forget to check out the new lesson that will be uploaded this Monday. And remember, even though I'm uploading lesson #4 this week, feel free to start with lesson #1. Again, I'm guiding you through a portrait painting project using the classical approach. So feel free to send me images from project 1 for student-teacher feedback, as well as those of you that are in the supporter tier. Feel free to go ahead and check out the behind the scenes episode that will be uploaded today as well. Don't forget about the monthly live stream. Thanks again for all of your support, and I'll see you on the next episode.